We're at a party. All right, there's balloons flying. In walks Homer. Shortly after, a woman walks in. Homer sees this woman and says, "Oh my gosh, I have to go talk to this woman." So Homer walks over and introduces himself. He says, "Hi, I'm Homer." Marge says, "Hi, I'm Marge." And Homer and Marge begin a conversation with each other. Now, Homer and Marge can converse with each other because they're using a kind of local addressing. While they're at the party, Homer and Marge are going to use their names to communicate with each other so that Homer can talk to Marge and Marge will know that Homer is talking to Marge because Homer is using a local address of Marge. And that way, Jill won't get confused and think that Homer is talking with Jill. Now, maybe Marge and Jill are standing right next to each other, and Homer's talking and he doesn't identify who he's communicating with. So Jill has to stop and ask and say, "Hey, Homer, who are you talking to?" And Homer can say, "Oh, I was talking to Marge." So now Jill knows that that conversation is not meant for her. So our local addressing is our name. So if we start to categorize this little party that we went to, we have local. We have a category of local, and we're going to use our individual first names for that local addressing. So the party's wrapping up. Homer and Marge had a great time. They chatted all night. Party ends. Homer says to Marge, "Marge, may I please have your phone number?" And Marge says, "Oh, yes, Homer, here you go." And now Marge gives Homer her phone number. Homer now has Marge's global address because now Homer can use that phone number to contact Marge from any place on the planet that has a telephone. So he knows that Marge has a local address of Marge, and now Homer knows that Marge's global address is 867-5309. So if we categorize this, now we have a global address, and that's our phone number. So we have a local address, our name, a global address, our phone number. And if we think about it, our local address, our name, allows people in the same room as us to call attention to us and identify us. And our global address allows us to communicate with others when we're not in the same room with each other. Let's continue this. Right? So Homer gets excited a couple days later. He waits the mandatory 6 days and he wants to call Marge. So what does Homer do? He has Marge's global address. He just can't pick up the phone and start shouting into the phone and expecting that Marge is there. He has to go through a very special process to establish communication with Marge when he's using that global address. And that looks like this. He has to pick up the phone. He has to wait for the dial tone. He has to dial the number. After he dials the number, he's going to wait for the phone to ring. After the phone rings, Marge is going to pick up the phone. They're going to start the conversation. Marge is going to say hello. Homer says hello. Now we can send any information we want. During our conversation, we have cues that allow us to keep the conversation moving forward correctly. Those cues might be, I see, as acknowledgments that the message was sent and received. There might be a statement of, "I don't understand," or "You're breaking up," meaning, "I don't get the message, can you repeat it?" Or we may have the end of the conversation saying, "Goodbye, bye, see you later," and shutting the conversation down. Now, all these pieces, the setting up of the conversation by picking up the phone, waiting for the dial tone, dialing the number, waiting for it to ring, waiting for somebody to answer, saying hello, hello, all that stuff does not add to the conversation at all. There's no data being transferred at all, except acknowledgments that data was transferred or a protocol to establish or end the conversation. So although we're sending messages, our messages are meant to keep the conversation alive and not necessarily to transfer information. So if we look at this, we can create a new category called cues. And our cues are going to be what is used to set up and tear down our conversation, especially in the global sense when we're using the telephone. It's also going to be used to keep the conversation moving by saying, "Yes, I understand," or "No, I don't understand. Please repeat that." Last, we have our actual conversation. How was your day? What's the weather like by you? I like talking to you at the party. I think your hair is pretty. Things like this, right? This is our conversation. This is the data that we're actually sending. This is the content. We just need all that other stuff in order to send these messages. In order to have a very personal conversation with Marge, we need to know her local address, which is her name. If we're communicating with her globally, we need her global address or phone number. We need a method of establishing global communication using that phone number, as well as some cues in that conversation to keep it moving. And then with all of that, then we can actually start to send data, which is our conversation itself. So if we add this to our list here, we're going to add data as a component here, and this is going to be our conversation, right? The communication that we transfer back and forth. There's actually one more category that we didn't talk about. We actually talked about it in the previous module of this video, and that was the media that we're using. In this case, the media we're using is air and wires. The air we're using to vibrate our vocal cords to send out our messages. The wires is what the telephone is converting our vibrating air into the electrical signals that go over the wires. So we have these 5 categories, and we have individual components that happen in each of the categories. This is going to tie directly into what we're doing in data networking.